The great way flows quietly everywhere, to the left and to the right, embracing all things but never ruling over them. It moves as the wind moves, touching leaf and stone alike, without preference and without demand. When its work is done, it does not claim reward, it has no pride in its perfection, and so, paradoxically, it endures forever. The more, therefore, you release your grip and learn to trust the flow of things, the more deeply you become a participant in power itself. Not the kind of power that dominates or commands, but the kind that breathes, that harmonizes, that allows all things to find their own way. And that's the strange truth, you see. The more you let others carry their part, the more the whole carries you. Instead of lying awake at night, plotting, controlling, fearing the loose ends, you simply let the world do its work for you. You rest, because you understand that the same energy that grows the trees and moves the tides is the energy that moves you. It wakes you each morning without a clock. You whisper to yourself, "Wake me at 6, and some mysterious rhythm within obey. You are, in fact, part of something that already knows what to do, even when you don't. It sounds like a paradox, doesn't it? That to be one with the universe, you must not try to control it. To seek unity through domination is to create separation. You push, and the world pushes back. You struggle to grasp the whole, and in doing so, you lose it entirely. The secret is to treat the universe as you would a trusted friend, to watch, to listen, to say, "Let's see what you're going to do," and mean it. For when you trust what is beyond you, you are really trusting what is within you, because the boundary between them was only ever drawn by thought. And then comes the funny thing. You don't know where your decisions come from. They arise like hiccups, like birds flying from a hidden forest. We imagine ourselves to be the authors, but we are merely the witnesses. A thought appears, and we take credit for it. A decision unfolds, and we call it mine. But when you look closely, you can't trace it back to a beginning. The mind simply presents its verdict, and the body obeys. It is spontaneous, like laughter. There was once a farmer who hired a young man to help him. On the first day, he set him to chopping wood, and by evening the young man had finished what usually took 3 men 2 days to do. Astonished, the farmer sent him to mend the fences. By the next sunset, every broken board was repaired. So on the 3rd day, the farmer, running out of things to assign, brought him to the cellar. "Here," he said, "sort these potatoes, the ones to sell, the ones to plant, and the ones to throw away." Then he left him to it. But by the end of the day, the young man came upstairs, exhausted, saying, "That's it, I quit." "Quit?" said the farmer. "Why? You're the best worker I've ever had." And the young man replied, "Sir, I can chop and mend all day, but this potato business, decision after decision after decision, that's too much for any man." And isn't that what we do? We exhaust ourselves deciding. We question whether we've thought enough, consulted enough, waited long enough, and in the end we never can. Every situation holds infinite variables, countless unseen possibilities. You can't compute them all. Inevitably, you act, not from certainty but from trust disguised as choice. You make a move and the rest unfolds. And the miracle is that somehow it works, not always as you planned, but more often than reason would predict. Because the truth is that most of our so-called conscious control has very little to do with how things actually turn out. The world runs itself, the body breathes itself, the stars move without command. The more you understand that, the lighter you become, the more effortless your decisions grow. Those who try to command every detail wither under the burden. Those who trust, who delegate, who allow others to move with them, they flourish. It's why the wisest leaders aren't the loudest. They listen, they allow, they know when to step aside. And it's why nature herself is the perfect leader. She nourishes all things but never lords it over them. So let the current carry you. Give authority back to the rhythm that made you. In doing so, you discover that what you thought was other was never separate from you at all. The ocean does not control its waves, yet every wave is its expression. To surrender is not to lose yourself. It is to find yourself everywhere. And so we begin here, at the threshold of the great paradox, that only by letting go do we truly hold everything, that only by ceasing to strive do we finally arrive. There is a strange intelligence in the rhythm of life, something that moves through every atom without asking for permission, as if existence itself knew exactly what it was doing long before you arrived to question it. The river flows because it cannot do otherwise. The clouds drift not by decision but by nature. And in that effortless unfolding lies the secret of all harmony. The difficulty for us, for human beings, is that we have forgotten how to move in that same way. We think too much about how to be spontaneous, and the moment you think about it, spontaneity is gone. From the moment we wake up, the mind begins its restless calculations. What must I do? How can I be certain? What if I'm wrong? Yet underneath all that noise, something far more ancient and trustworthy is already guiding every heartbeat, every breath, every impulse to turn, walk, speak. You don't tell your lungs to breathe or your heart to beat. You trust that they know how. But somewhere along the line, we learn to doubt that natural intelligence. We were taught to supervise ourselves constantly, to be the managers of our own existence, as if life itself couldn't be trusted without our permission. And that is the root of our exhaustion, the endless self-surveillance. We live as if we were both the performer and the critic, never allowing a moment of simple being. But when you begin to see that the universe is not something outside of you, when you realize that the very energy that drives your thoughts is the same that stirs the tides, then something extraordinary happens. You begin to relax, not out of laziness or indifference, but out of a deeper understanding that you are never apart from the flow. It takes courage to trust the movement of life, because trust feels like falling. The ego resists it, terrified that if it loosens its grip, everything will collapse. Yet the irony is that everything collapses precisely because of that grip. When you try to control the wave, you are thrown by it. But when you ride it, when you let it carry you, you realize it was never your enemy. It was your own energy in motion. We live in an age obsessed with control of the environment, of emotions, of the future itself. But the more control we demand, the less control we actually have. A wise sailor never tries to command the sea. He learns to read it, to move with it, to let its power become his. Life asks of us the same wisdom. To steer, yes, but never to fight the current. Every decision, every step forward comes from a space much deeper than thought. You can feel it if you listen carefully, the quiet pulse beneath the chatter of the mind. That's the same intelligence that wakes you up just before the alarm, that makes your hand reach out to catch a falling glass before you've had time to think. You didn't calculate those actions. They happened through you. The same force that organizes galaxies is also moving through your nerves and fingertips. To trust that force is to begin to live in harmony with it. And this harmony is not passive, it's alive, responsive, and infinitely creative. When you let go of the anxious need to predict or to be certain, you discover that life starts helping you. Events align, people appear, ideas surface, not because you forced them to, but because you stopped blocking them. It's as if you had been holding your breath your entire life, and suddenly you remember how to breathe again. There's a saying in the old Taoist texts, when the master governs, the people are hardly aware that he exists. That is how the great intelligence operates. It does not impose, it cooperates. And when you begin to live in that same spirit, your actions become effortless. Things get done, but without the struggle. You may look from the outside like someone who is working hard, but inside there is only stillness, only flow. To live this way is not to withdraw from life, but to enter it more deeply. You start to sense the fine threads connecting everything, the subtle balance between effort and surrender, between doing and allowing. You act, but you no longer act against the grain. You make decisions, but you don't torment yourself about whether they are right or wrong, because you understand that every path leads back to the same source. You no longer try to control the outcome. You participate in the unfolding. And then life becomes almost playful. You start to see that every challenge, every coincidence, every loss and gain are movements of the same dance. When you meet life in that way, even failure loses its sting, because it too becomes part of the rhythm. You begin to notice that what you once called mistakes were simply necessary turns in the current that carried you exactly where you needed to be. That is the real meaning of trust. Not blind faith or passive hope, but a quiet recognition that the same intelligence that moves the stars moves through you. To resist it is to fight your own heartbeat. To surrender to it is to come home. And in that homecoming, there is no need to control, no need to grasp, no need to be certain. There is only the quiet knowing that everything, absolutely everything, is already flowing as it should. There's a moment in every life when the illusion of control begins to crack. It doesn't always happen in a single dramatic instant. Sometimes it comes quietly, in the pause between plans that didn't unfold as you intended, in the soft realization that despite all your effort, life continues to surprise you. That's when something deeper begins to stir. A faint whisper reminding you that perhaps you were never supposed to manage the entire symphony. You were meant to play your part and trust that the music knows how to resolve itself. You see, the great paradox of existence is that order does not come from control. It arises from trust. The entire cosmos functions through this effortless coordination. Planets circling their stars, tides responding to the pull of invisible moons, the heart pulsing to rhythms you never consciously set. And yet, here we are, caught in the strange conviction that without our constant supervision, everything will fall apart. But what if the opposite were true? What if it is precisely our interference, our fear, our insistence on certainty that disturbs the natural flow? The truth is, life has always been self-organizing. It does not need our permission to evolve. It requires only that we stop resisting the very current that sustains us. Think of the seed. It doesn't struggle to become a tree. It doesn't analyze the soil, debate the direction of the sunlight, or calculate the chemistry of its growth. It simply responds. It yields to gravity, opens to warmth, and trusts that the earth will carry it upward. Everything about its existence is cooperation. The seed never questions whether it will bloom. It just follows the deep intelligence that has guided life since the beginning of time. We humans, however, are strange creatures. We are the only part of nature that doubts itself. We stand in front of the mirror and wonder if we're doing it right, if we're enough, if we're in control. And this anxiety, this constant questioning, is what keeps us trapped in the illusion of separateness. We forget that we are not observers of life. We are life itself, looking at itself through human eyes. The irony is that the more we try to direct the play, the less we enjoy the performance. We become like actors obsessed with their lines, terrified of forgetting them, missing the joy of the story unfolding around them. But when you let go, when you finally allow the scene to move without forcing it, you rediscover the beauty of improvisation, the spontaneous intelligence that carries all of existence forward. There is a story of a musician who spent years perfecting his art. He practiced every scale, studied every note, mastered every technique. But when he performed, something was missing. His music was flawless, but lifeless. One night, exhausted and defeated, he sat by the river and simply played for no one. He stopped thinking, stopped trying, and the music began to breathe. The river answered his melody, the wind joined in harmony, and for the first time his playing became alive. He realized that music, like life, is not meant to be controlled. It's meant to be allowed. That is the essence of trust. To act without the need to dominate the outcome. To do what is in front of you with sincerity and let the rest unfold as it will. This doesn't mean you become passive or careless. On the contrary, you become more fully engaged, more aware, because you're no longer split between doing and worrying about doing. You become like the archer who releases the arrow and doesn't cling to where it lands. The action is complete in itself. This principle of trust extends beyond the individual. It is the foundation of true cooperation, whether in nature, in society, or in the quiet relationships between people. When you trust others, when you give them space to act and express, you create an intelligence greater than your own. Every living system, every body, every forest, every community thrives on delegation. Power shared becomes power multiplied. Life itself is built on that design. That's why the most profound leaders are those who lead by letting go. They don't stand above others, commanding obedience. They stand among them, awakening the same intelligence in everyone. They know that the moment you stop clutching the reins, the horse begins to move naturally. Trust, in this sense, is not a weakness. It's the highest form of wisdom. And as strange as it may seem, the same principle applies to the smallest things. When you stop overthinking, your words flow. When you stop worrying about sleep, you drift into it. When you stop chasing happiness, it finds you. There's a rhythm to existence that only reveals itself when you stop trying to conduct it. To live in this way requires faith, but not in the religious sense. Faith as a direct, visceral knowing that life works, even when you don't understand how. That kind of faith grows through experience, through falling and being caught, through losing and realizing you were never lost. You begin to see patterns, synchronicities, moments of grace that cannot be planned, and gradually you start to trust again. And that is when life changes, not because it becomes easier, but because you are no longer fighting it. You begin to sense the current that has always been carrying you, even through the turbulence. You stop asking, what if this goes wrong? And begin to wonder, what if everything is already right? In that shift, a new kind of freedom appears. Not the freedom to control, but the freedom to move effortlessly with what is. To trust life is to remember that you are not a separate fragment trying to survive in an indifferent universe. You are the universe, playing at being human, learning again and again how to flow. And once that truth sinks in, not as an idea, but as a felt reality, every breath becomes an act of faith, every moment an invitation to let go a little more, until you finally understand that you were never falling at all. You were always being carried. There is something profoundly liberating about realizing that you were never meant to have everything under control. It doesn't come as a sudden flash of enlightenment. It comes slowly, like dawn seeping through the cracks of a darkened room. You start to notice that life, in its quiet intelligence, seems to know exactly where to take you, even when you have no idea where you're going. The missed train that leads to the conversation that changes everything. The failure that turns into a door you didn't know you wanted to open. Life, if you pay attention, is always arranging itself in ways that far exceed your limited calculations. We live in a culture obsessed with prediction and precision. We want guarantees, strategies, the illusion that we can map the unknown. But life is not a machine, it's a mystery. And mystery does not yield to pressure. It reveals itself only to those who are patient enough to listen. The need to control is born from fear. The quiet fear that without your supervision, things will fall apart. Yet the moment you loosen your grip, you realize that the universe was never waiting for your permission to function. It has been moving perfectly well for billions of years before you arrived. Every atom, every cell, every movement of nature carries within it the wisdom of balance. The tree bends so the wind won't break it. The river curves because straight lines would make it stagnate. The seasons shift without struggle. Why then do we resist so fiercely the same rhythm that sustains everything else? Perhaps because somewhere along the way, we began to believe that being human meant being separate from the whole, that intelligence meant control rather than harmony. But the truth is that real intelligence is not about domination. It's about understanding connection. The body knows this instinctively. You don't tell your heart how to beat or your stomach how to digest. They cooperate without your awareness. Life operates through this invisible cooperation, this quiet agreement between forces. And when we learn to mirror that within ourselves, everything becomes simpler. There's a deeper lesson here, the difference between effort and strain. Effort is natural, it's life expressing itself through you. Strain is resistance disguised as productivity. When you act from effort, things align. When you act from strain, things fracture. You can feel the difference instantly. Effort feels alive while strain feels heavy. Most people spend their lives in strain, trying to wrestle with life instead of working with it. Yet all of nature, from the blooming of a flower to the birth of a star, operates without strain. It's not that we shouldn't plan or dream. It's that our plans should leave room for the unknown, because the unknown is not chaos, it's creation. Every discovery, every innovation, every act of beauty is born from that space beyond our control. The greatest artists, scientists, and thinkers have always known this. They prepare, they learn, but when the moment comes, they let go. They allow the inspiration to move through them, not from them. Genius is not possession, it's participation. And participation requires trust, not blind faith, but a conscious willingness to be part of something larger than your own agenda, to let life use you as one of its many instruments. When you stop trying to force outcomes and start to listen to the direction life wants to move, you discover that your desires and the world's rhythm were never at odds. They were two halves of the same melody. It's easy to forget this because the mind is loud and impatient. It demands answers. It wants to know where it's going, when it will arrive, and what the reward will be. But the deeper intelligence within you doesn't speak in words. It speaks in sensations, in quiet intuition, in moments of stillness where you suddenly know what to do without knowing why. That's the voice of the same force that spins galaxies and whispers to the tide. It's not mystical. It's natural. It's what happens when you stop talking over life and start listening to it. And once you begin to live like this, you realize that surrender is not defeat. It's the highest expression of courage. To surrender is to stand naked before the mystery and say, I trust you. Not because you know how things will unfold, but because you understand that resistance has never brought you peace. You stop fighting with what is, and in doing so, you discover a kind of peace that doesn't depend on circumstances. From that peace, something extraordinary emerges, a new kind of action. It's not passive acceptance nor frantic reaction. It's the calm decisiveness that comes from alignment. You act when it's time to act, you wait when it's time to wait, and both feel equally right. This is what the sages meant when they spoke of effortless action, of doing without doing. It's not laziness, it's mastery. Because the more you allow life to lead, the more skillfully you move through it. Things that once seemed complex begin to resolve themselves. Situations that once felt impossible begin to open. It's not magic, it's coherence. You are no longer acting as a separate fragment against the world. You're moving with the whole, and the whole knows exactly where it's going. In time, this way of being becomes your second nature. You stop chasing certainty because you no longer need it. You begin to see that every experience, pleasant or painful, has its purpose in shaping the vast pattern of your unfolding. And when you finally understand that, when you truly see that nothing was ever random, the burden of control dissolves entirely. You start to live as the river lives, flowing, turning, yielding, but always moving forward. You trust that even when the path curves out of sight, it still leads to the ocean. And maybe that's all trust really is. Not knowing where the current goes, but knowing that it will always carry you home. There comes a time when you begin to understand that what you call your life is not something happening to you, but something happening through you. Like wind passing through the strings of an instrument, life plays its music using the shape of who you are. And the sound that emerges, the moments, the emotions, the encounters, is never entirely yours, nor entirely the world's. It's a collaboration, a mysterious duet between what you will and what simply is. Most of us spend years trying to control that melody. We practice perfection, chase certainty, and try to write every note ourselves. But eventually, something inside begins to rebel against this endless effort. You feel it in those quiet moments when you realize how little control you truly have. You can plan your path, but not the weather. You can choose your words, but not how they'll be received. You can build a fortress of logic and yet still be undone by a single moment of beauty or loss. Life keeps reminding you gently or harshly that you are part of something larger, something that cannot be managed, only met. And in that realization, there's both fear and freedom. Fear, because it shatters the illusion of being the master of your destiny. Freedom, because it releases you from the exhausting task of having to be. You start to see that life is not a battle to be won, but a conversation to be listened to. Every event, every person, every silence is saying something to you, if only you would stop shouting over it with your plans. We tend to believe that surrender means giving up, but it's actually the beginning of genuine participation. You can't dance with a partner while insisting on leading every step. You can't listen to music while trying to control every note. In the same way, you can't truly live while resisting the flow of life itself. To surrender is not to resign, it is to finally align. It's a willingness to say, show me where you're going, and I'll go with you. This alignment doesn't erase your individuality, it refines it. Just as each wave has its own form, yet remains inseparable from the ocean, you begin to act with a strength that feels less forced, more natural. You stop chasing power and instead start embodying it. Power no longer feels like domination, it feels like connection. Because real power is never mine or yours. It's what moves through both when we stop blocking it. Think of how nature operates. The roots don't compete with the branches, they feed each other. The rain doesn't argue with the mountain. It falls, runs, and returns. Each element fulfills its role without needing recognition. That's the kind of intelligence we are part of. The problem is that we've trained ourselves to think in separation. My goals, my achievements, my failures. But everything you've ever done has been supported by countless invisible hands. The people who taught you, the ones who challenged you, the ones who unknowingly guided you by their own mistakes. Even the air that fills your lungs is a gift of the trees. and they ask for nothing in return. Once you begin to see this, gratitude becomes unavoidable. You stop treating life as a possession and start experiencing it as participation. Gratitude is not a moral duty, it's a natural consequence of awareness. It's what happens when you finally notice how much is already being done for you without your effort. The heartbeat you never started, the sunrise you never painted, the silence that waits for your words. Gratitude dissolves the illusion of isolation. It makes you part of the orchestra again. And when that happens, something subtle changes in how you move through the world. You stop pushing so hard, not because you've become passive, but because you've become precise. You know where to act and where to let things be. There's a clarity that replaces the old anxiety, a kind of inner rhythm that keeps time with the pulse of existence. You find that the right people arrive when they must, the right words appear when they're needed, and that often the things you once called coincidences were simply the universe responding to your openness. It doesn't mean everything becomes easy. Life will still rise and fall. Joy will still meet sorrow. But even pain begins to take on a new texture. It's no longer an enemy. It's part of the unfolding, another wave in the great sea of experience. You begin to sense that every difficulty contains its own wisdom, waiting to be revealed the moment you stop fighting it. Pain, after all, is not punishment. It's the sound of something growing, stretching, being reshaped. There's a quiet dignity in trusting this process. It means you no longer need to make everything happen. You allow things to happen through you. You still plan, you still dream, but you know now that the plan is a raft, not the ocean. You steer, but the current carries you. And as you move like this, half guiding, half guided, you start to notice how much lighter life feels. Decisions become less agonizing, outcomes less dramatic. You stop needing constant proof that everything will be all right because you've started to experience it directly, the quiet rhythm beneath all chaos, the intelligence within every apparent accident. To live this way is to rediscover wonder. You walk the same streets, but they look different. The trees seem to breathe with you. The air feels less heavy. You begin to sense the living intelligence in all things. The hum beneath the silence, the movement behind stillness. It's not a mystical experience reserved for saints or sages. It's simply the moment when you stop standing outside of life and realize you were never outside to begin with. And when that awareness deepens, the simplest truth reveals itself. You don't have to hold the universe together. It was never your job. The stars will keep burning, the rivers will keep flowing, the heart will keep beating. All you're asked to do is participate, to listen, to respond, to trust the current as it carries you onward. Because in that trust, you find not only peace, but purpose. The purpose of being exactly what life needs you to be right now, awake, present, and willing to flow. At some point, you begin to understand that peace is not found in what you gain, but in what you stop needing to control. You realize that life has its own tempo, its own silent choreography, and that your attempts to rush or restrain it only create tension between what is and what you wish it to be. For years, you may have tried to wrestle with that tension, forcing outcomes, chasing meaning, demanding clarity, but the truth was always waiting underneath your noise. That the river doesn't need to explain its course to the rocks it passes, and you don't need to explain your path to life itself. There's a kind of grace that emerges when you finally allow yourself to trust the unfolding even when you don't understand it. Not because everything suddenly becomes easy, but because you stop expecting it to be. You begin to see that what we call uncertainty is not a flaw in the system. It's the very space where life happens. If everything were predictable, there would be no discovery, no creation, no awakening. Uncertainty is not chaos. It's possibility disguised as mystery. Look at how nature operates. Every sunrise looks the same, yet no two are ever identical. Every wave seems to follow the next, yet each has its own shape, its own sound, its own life. Nothing repeats, and yet everything flows in order. Life, by its nature, thrives on impermanence, and the sooner we learn to move with that rhythm instead of against it, the more fully we begin to live. The great paradox is that the moment you stop clinging to control, you gain a different kind of strength. One that doesn't depend on outcomes or appearances. It's a strength born of alignment. You don't stand apart from life anymore. You move with it. The resistance that once consumed your energy dissolves, and what remains is clarity. Not the clarity that comes from knowing every answer, but the clarity that comes from no longer needing to know. The world around you doesn't change overnight. but your way of seeing it does. The same challenges that once provoked panic now appear as part of a larger pattern. You start to recognize that every setback, every delay, every wrong turn was quietly teaching you something you couldn't have learned otherwise. The storm that uprooted you also planted you somewhere new. The silence you once feared becomes a kind of language. Life stops being a series of random interruptions and begins to feel like a conversation, one that deepens every time you stop trying to speak over it. What we often call letting go is not an act of giving up, it's an act of remembering. Remembering that you were never separate from what you were chasing, that the peace you sought was not hiding in the future, but waiting beneath the layers of your own resistance. Every time you release the need to control, you peel back one of those layers. What's revealed isn't emptiness, it's presence, it's awareness. It's the quiet realization that the same intelligence that grows the forests and shapes the stars is already breathing you. And once you see that, you can no longer live as you once did. You start to sense that your thoughts, your choices, your very existence are not isolated events, but threads in a vast and living fabric. The way you speak, the way you move, the way you treat others, it all ripples outward. You begin to understand that cooperation, not competition, is the natural state of life. The trees don't hoard sunlight, they share it through the forest canopy. Rivers don't withhold water, they carry it onward to wherever it's needed most. In nature, nothing exists for itself alone, and neither do you. To live with this awareness is to live with humility, but not the kind that diminishes you. It's a humility that liberates. You no longer have to pretend to be the center of everything. You can finally relax into being part of everything. And strangely, in that relaxation, you become more powerful, not because you control more, but because you resist less. You start to act from a place of quiet certainty, a confidence that doesn't shout, but moves like gravity, subtle and unshakable. This is what wisdom feels like. Not a library of answers, but a stillness within the questions. You stop searching for meaning and start living meaningfully. You see that joy is not the absence of pain, but the willingness to feel it all without closing your heart. You stop asking, why is this happening to me? And start asking, what is this showing me? That single shift in perception turns suffering into insight, struggle into initiation. And through it all, life keeps doing what it has always done, changing, unfolding, teaching. There will still be loss and fear and uncertainty, but they no longer own you. You begin to welcome them as part of the same movement that brings love, beauty, and laughter, because you understand now that it's all one current, one river, one dance. The tide rises and falls, but the ocean remains. When you finally rest in that understanding, when you stop fighting the impermanence of all things, a kind of quiet joy fills the space that fear once occupied. You realize that you don't need guarantees, because you already belong to something far greater than security could ever offer. You are the rhythm, not the note, the wind, not the leaf. You are the silent intelligence that moves everything forward, endlessly creating, endlessly dissolving, endlessly beginning again. And maybe that's what it means to awaken, not to escape the world, but to see it clearly for the first time. To understand that the same mystery that breathes through galaxies also breathes through you. To live not as a spectator, nor as a controller, but as a participant in the great unfolding. Because once you truly see that, control becomes irrelevant. What remains is trust. And in that trust, life finally starts to feel like what it has always been. A sacred rhythm that needs no conductor, only your willingness to dance.